Once upon a time, two gentlemen fell in love. They walked in the park together, sang songs together, and held each other when the wind chilled. They inspired each other. They even made that oh-so-important decision. But one of them couldn't seem to act so in love, though he always said he longed to. He'd refuse the other's kisses and flinch his hand away when the other went to hold it. Before the day came that would begin their shared eternity, the two agreed that they'd fallen out of love and they parted ways. But was that really such a good idea?
Hello! Have you ever been inspired by something? As this medium only allows for a one-way conversation, I'll do the courtesy of answering for you, if that's all right. You have been inspired. This counts for everyone. It could be the inspiration to eat a certain food a character described in a book, or the inspiration to be kind after remembering a teacher's gentle words while you cried in their classroom. But if you do consider yourself a creative, you might be particularly familiar with the concept. It was the famed author Mark Twain who famously stated that there is no such thing as a new idea. This isn't to say, however, that the art of making and creating is needless and fruitless due to everything having been done before. On the contrary, art is only so beautiful because it exists in the context of others. Last time, I spoke a bit about the conversation of art, that the act of making alongside others is a language in its own right, and is how art moves forward and how we reflect upon ourselves. But this is all very general talk. Let's be a little more specific. There's a show in particular that exists within a rather interesting space of inspiration. I'm not just talking about it because I happen to love it, although I'm not talking about it because I love it. That show is the hit 2013 to 2019 cartoon Steven Universe. Now, Steven Universe's creator, Rebecca Sugar, has spoken a good deal about a certain anime that influenced them in their youth and has bled into their own work. It was a show from 1997 known as Revolutionary Girl Utena, or Shoujo Kagome Utena in the original Japanese, or Utena la Fillette Révolutionnaire if you're fancy, or French, I suppose. I'd like to do a little bit of comparison between Steven Universe and Utena, but before we go on, so that we don't get lost, it might behoove us to establish what exactly the contents are of these two shows. Steven Universe follows the titular character growing up in a charming beachside city, aptly called Beach City, as he comes to learn more about his magical heritage. Alongside his human father, he's raised by three of his departed mother's compatriots, Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl, wonderful members of an alien race called Gems, called so due to the fact that they are gemstones with humanoid bodies made of light. I say his mother departed, but she didn't exactly die. Steven's mother was also a gem, and gems aren't typically able to have children. Therefore, once Steven was born, she had to give up her body so that he might have one. She became him, in a way, making him the first half-gem. Throughout the show, Steven finds out more about the history of the gems, as well as the history of his mother who started a rebellion against the gem homeworld, and as more comes to light, these histories become less and less black and white. Revolutionary Girl Utena, in turn, centers around a middle schooler named Utena Tenjo. When Utena was a young child, she tragically lost both her parents. One day, as she was distraught and alone, a prince came to her and dried her tears. In awe of the prince and his ability to save her from her sadness, she vowed to become a prince herself. In the present day, she finds herself at Oteri Academy and winds up entwined with a strange group of students that duel each other for the hand of the Rose Bride, an even stranger girl named Anthe Himemia, who's said to grant the power of world revolution to her betrothed. What the revolution is depends on who you ask, whether it be self-actualization, the power of miracles, or the ability to change the world in accordance with your idealized perception. In some ways, it's just becoming an adult. Something you must understand about Utena is that it's not a very literal show. Things can mean many things at once. At times, the literal is in fact the figurative, and the figurative is in fact the literal, the aesthetics the theme, and the theme the plot. While it makes the show daunting, it also makes it spectacular. Rebecca Sugar, aforementioned creator of Steven Universe, has gone on record multiple times describing her love for Utena. When I was a teenager, that show was an epiphany for me, they said in a Paste magazine interview with Zach Blumenfeld. In a TikTok, Sugar says that they named the character Connie after the friend that lent them Revolutionary Girl Utena in high school. This love for the show is evident in the numerous visual influences from and visual nods to Utena hidden throughout Steven, like the motif of roses, a dueling arena in the sky, and direct shot remakes in the sword fighting. But I think it'd be fun to take a specific case of Steven Universe referencing Utena visually and use that case to glean some insight back into Steven itself and its own visual thematics. Let's compare a certain flashback story told in the final season of Steven Universe to the various flashbacks of Utena. In Utena, there are particular pasts of the characters told in a particular way. You have your normal flashbacks, of course, but there are some in which the characters' bodies are all blacked out, with only their hair and clothing having color. This is an example of the show taking a non-visual theme and making it into a visual element. In these flashbacks, the story being presented to us isn't exactly true. Very often it's idealized, or if not idealized, it's subconsciously altered by the memory's holder in order to confirm their beliefs, or they're just plain missing information. A good deal of Revolutionary Girl Utena is a commentary on how we confront our memories and the stories we tell ourselves about our pasts to confirm our wants and identities. So then, the characters' faces are blacked out to show the absence of certain facts, often not an intentional omission on the part of the memory's holder, but an omission nonetheless. To get an example fairly early on in the show, let's take a look at Miki Kaoru, the pianist prodigy. In episodes 4 and 5 of Revolutionary Girl Utena, the Sunlit Garden Prelude and the Sunlit Garden Finale, respectively, Miki talks a lot about his shining thing, something, a feeling, a passion, an inspiration he once had in his life but has since faded. He believes he's found his shining thing again in Anthihimemia, and more specifically in the sound of her piano playing. You see, as told by Miki, he used to play the piano with his sister, his lovely, innocent sister Kozue, when they were young children. It's her playing that was the beacon of his shining thing, and it's her pianist's tone that he now sees in Himemia. The two often played together in a garden, the Sunlit Garden, which is also the namesake of a piano piece the two wrote. He goes to his sister about holding a concert together. She's a bit hesitant, scared of the crowd, but he assures her that he'll be right by her side. Unfortunately, when the time of the recital comes, Miki contracts the measles, forcing Kozue to go on stage by herself. She runs away from the stage, swearing off playing piano ever again, thus losing Miki his shining thing. But, as you might have gathered, this isn't the whole story. We actually meet Kozue herself a bit after we learn this tale. Not at all the sweet little thing we see in Miki's flashback. Kozue is sarcastic and promiscuous. Perhaps more surprising, however, is Miki's attitude toward her. Despite having such reverence for her young self, Miki acts cold and agitated in conversation with his present-day sister. And, at the end of episode 5, Kozue says that when it came to piano playing, she never really had any talent, and that she never even liked it that much. People used to think she could play well, she says, but she only ever played with Miki, and it was really her brother's talent they heard. She fled the stage of the concert not out of stage fright, but because she literally couldn't play. So, what was Miki's shining thing if this past was so fraudulent? Maybe it's the relationship he shared with his sister, that it was just playing together that inspired him, not necessarily the actual sound of his sister's playing. He's lost his shining thing because he now refuses the person his sister is, retreating to an idea of what she was. Anthe is a version of the sister he's lost, and he sees in her what he's lost in his sister: kinship. Or maybe his shining thing is instead his lost innocence, Anthe, so quiet and pretty, being the perfect model to project this innocence upon, no matter who she actually is. The sunlit garden was a place of childhood that no longer exists. His sister certainly isn't innocent anymore. But maybe she never was. Maybe that innocence never existed. Maybe his shining thing never existed. After all, it was his playing that was so beautiful, not Kozwe's. He sees in Anthe the magic of a lost relationship, the magic of a memory, and the magic of an idea that never was. It was all of these things, some of these things, and maybe none of these things. Revolutionary Girl Utena never answers outright what his shining thing is, and that's part of the reason I love it so. It dares to tell the audience that their perception of the show is as integral to it as the very visuals or characters or themes. But I'm getting off track. The point is, the show was being misleading when it told you Miki's backstory. It was heavily augmented to be the version of the story that Miki remembered, or maybe even wanted to remember. The voided characters signal the void where the missing details might have been. Now then, in the 13th episode of the 5th season of Steven Universe, Your Mother and Mine, Garnet tells a story to the off-colors, gems who are shunned on Homeworld because of their deformities and differences. The story is about Steven's mother, the revolutionary Rose Quartz. In it, we see the origin of... Oh, hold on. Doesn't that look familiar? This flashback utilizes the same blacked-out figures as Utena. Now, why would it do that? It's entirely possible, of course, that it's just for the aesthetic, and don't get me wrong, it does look very cool, and it serves, as all the other references in the show do, as a nod to Revolutionary Girl Utena. But what if it's something more? I should warn you before I go on, I am about to commit the most heinous of crimes, the bane of those children who despised their time in English class, the villain of all blue curtains, reading too deep. There's a very high chance that what I'm about to tell you wasn't thought of at all by anyone who made Steven Universe. So then, why bother with the analysis? Well, while no story can exist outside the context in which it was made, it still exists as its own creation. It's a bit of that classic phrase, death of the author, coined by the literary critic Roland Barthes. The text, after being created by its author or authors, now exists on its own, and there's value in discussing the text as it exists, especially if the conversation happens to be interesting, or can provide a new appreciation for the text. And who's to say, maybe the crew really was thinking of it. Now, why would Steven Universe choose to silhouette the characters' bodies in this flashback, if not just for aesthetic purposes? Well, why don't we take a look at what it meant in Utena, and try applying it to Steven? Could this flashback be implying that its contents aren't entirely truthful? So, what are those contents? The diamonds, rulers of all gems, were colonizing the galaxy so that they might spread their order and perfection. The youngest of them, Pink Diamond, set out to make Earth her very first colony. Various soldier and worker gems were created out of the Earth's crust. They were life forms only meant to fit their mold, and no one had ever dared to think otherwise, until there was Rose Quartz. Though she was made to fulfill the orders of her diamond, Rose couldn't ignore the beauty of her surroundings and the wonderful life that already existed on Earth. When Rose talked of this life with her fellow gem soldiers, news of her precocity made its way to Pink Diamond. After being summoned, Rose pleaded with her diamond to move the colony elsewhere so that they wouldn't destroy the life that Earth bears. Pink Diamond responded with a laugh, a wicked, empty sound, as Garnet puts it. When Rose returns to work, she cannot ignore the beauty and preciousness she's found, nor the cruelty of her overlord, and so she rebels, and forms an alliance with other misfit and enlightened gems. Her army comes to be known as the Crystal Gems, and the group fights against Diamond tyranny. Thus ensues a terrible war. So to end it, and rid Earth of colonizers for good, Rose makes the decision to personally shatter Pink Diamond, effectively ending the Diamond's life and her reign of terror. Now, this story isn't necessarily wrong, but by silhouetting the characters, it's simplifying them, suggesting there's more to the story we don't know yet. There may be facts Garnet isn't aware of, facts whose omission makes things easier. I won't get into what Garnet might be leaving unsaid for the sake of spoilers, but by using Utena's form of backstory, Steven Universe is both telling its audience a story and telling them to question it. It's made all the more poignant when we realize this story is preceded by the off-color's own false ideas of who Rose Quartz is, based on the propaganda and rumors of Homeworld. She's a monster, a mistake, a myth. The truth is, if truth could ever truly exist, she and every other living being could never be so unambiguous. But, of course, this is only a specific instance of the show's inspiration. I'd like to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. The bigger, queerer picture. I know I mentioned Rebecca Sugar talking about Utena, but I didn't explain to you what exactly she said about it. In documentation of their love for it, they repeatedly mention how seeing something that played with gender and homosexuality made them feel seen. I was a bisexual teenager watching a show like Utena. It was stunning. I related to it in a way I'd never really felt before, and it stuck with me. They particularly note how the show plays with the semiotics of gender. Utena is a girl who dresses like a boy and finds her own queer love. Julia Risugawa is in love with another girl. Femininity, masculinity, and their internal hierarchy are deconstructed as parts played in a land of theatrics, and though the play is seemingly eternal, if you choose to do so, you can walk off stage. The world of gender, in our reality, is presented as inherently restricted, particularly to children. So seeing something that breaks that worldview can be so freeing. And Sugar, inspired by the freedom Utena gave them, created a show that had a male protagonist whose main color motif is pink and a sexless alien race. And it was the first mainstream children's show to have a gay wedding, thereby inspiring that freedom in the children and teens of another era. Even further, though, I think we can trace a pattern of how Utena's sapphism and queerity exists within Steven Universe. Revolutionary Girl Utena portrays its queerness dramatically and unabashedly. It never makes a secret of its theatricality, from its themes to its visuals, and its gayness is no different. The art of Utena is deeply in love with the human body, and positions its characters in the prettiness of homoeroticism. Though not as ridiculously dramatic, Steven Universe adopts this gaze in the way it shows its gayness and gender nonconformity. Not only that, and Utena does this too, but it puts its not necessarily gay parts through this lens as well. It's painting queerness as a beautiful picture to look at, and that's not at all a bad thing. It's intrinsically voyeuristic, yes, but it doesn't come from a place of othering, and it's never contradictory to the characters themselves. No. It's people who see homosexuality as something beautiful, showing you that it's something beautiful. And not just that, but it assumes the audience sees it as beautiful as well, not trying to convince them of anything. The only possibility of it being for someone who doesn't already see it as beauty is if that person simply hadn't considered it before, like a child or someone without education in such matters. But it's not intended for education, just appreciation, so it doesn't alienate the queer viewer. It's giving the gay audience a portrait of queer beauty, and in this world where this is so rarely the case, one can't help but feel included, whether they know yet that they are a part of something or not. In some ways it's asking, aren't they beautiful? But really, it's, aren't we beautiful? I think this is the same question revolutionary girl Utena asked Rebecca Sugar all those years ago. It must be said that this isn't where inspiration ends between these two shows. Revolutionary Girl Utena had its own inspirations. It was made by people who had seen other media, had their own life experiences, and met different people. Before Utena was a girl who decided to be a prince, Lady Oscar grew up as a boy, and before that, Princess Sapphire was born with both the heart of a girl and the heart of a boy. The members of Ottery Academy's student council have a monologue they often repeat about the revolution, that in order for a chick to be born, it must destroy its shell, its world. Their words are inspired by Hermann Hesse and his book Damien, words that only reached one of Utena's creators, Kunihiko Ikuhara, because a middle school classmate of his was so inspired by Damien that he recommended it to Ikuhara by saying that inside it was everything about him. Ikuhara has also mentioned Western directors Stanley Kubrick and David Lynch as influences, something you can most certainly see in his surrealist touch. Even the silhouettes I talked about at length before didn't come from nowhere. Maybe there's an even older origin, I can't be sure, but I believe B-Papas, the production group that made Utena, got this style from Junichi Nakahara, an illustrator who utilized these fanciful silhouettes when drawing fairy tales. And, of course, people other than Rebecca Sugar worked on Steven Universe, people that brought their own pasts and influences to the show. Plenty of other anime, video games, movies, etc. are referenced in Steven, and I'm sure you can make just as interesting comparisons there. I just happen to love Utena. Then, of course, Steven is not the only show since Utena to reference it. In fact, Utena is rich in references to it. I just happen to love Steven Universe. And I'd be doing you a grave disservice if I neglected to mention the main inspiration of Steven, Rebecca Sugar's brother, Steven Sugar, and the two's shared childhood. In the first episode of the Steven Universe podcast, Rebecca Sugar talks about the show being a collage of aspects and media from the two's past, as well as aspects and media from the pasts of the crew. So it's like keeping all of those pastiche elements, like grounding them always in something that made them personal to us. There's a whole history there that we as the viewers will never know, but have been lucky enough to feel in the details of the show they all created. I had a friend once, have a friend. The way he talked about the books he read, the plays he watched, I wanted to think that way too. I never thought much of my writing, but he seemed to think there was something special there. I wanted to think more, be a better writer, not for him, but for some spark he helped kindle. I will never be able to convey to you the role he has in my life, nor the role Utena has, nor the role Steven has, nor the role of all they have inspired. But I hope they come across in the details of our conversation. I hope in some small way I've inspired you to think about the things you love, maybe a bit deeper than you might have previously. I don't know. It's hard to conceptualize that I might have that much power, but I suppose we all do. Thank you, and have a lovely day.